Hello and welcome to the latest Autovista Group Insight video. We take a deep dive into the biggest topics around the automotive industry. I'm the Daily Brief journalist, Tom Geggers.
I'm the Daily Brief news editor, Phil Curry.
And I'm senior data journalist, Neil King.
So today we're actually going to discuss one of my favourite topics. It's electromobility and how it's been impacted by COVID-19. So Neil, the news has obviously been swamped with how coronavirus has been damaging the automotive industry, but have we seen any positive outcomes?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Not surprisingly, one key positive is that pollution levels have dramatically reduced. This was to be expected, given the dramatic reduction in people obviously commuting to work every day. Some, unfortunately, maybe for a foreseeable future, but certainly in the short term, congestion levels have reduced, and so to pollution levels. I know that Carbon Brief was talking about potentially pollution levels being down about 5-6% or 5.5% this year compared to last year, and that, not surprisingly, would actually be as they call it, the largest ever fall in CO2 emissions, more than during any previous economic crisis or period of war. So quite a dramatic positive there as far as pollution is concerned, but not necessarily one that will be entirely enduring.
Well, that brings me on to a question I was going to ask actually, Neil. Can we expect emissions to remain at these dramatic lows?
I think no. I mean, understandably, people, obviously schools are reopening, people are returning to work. It's inevitable that pollution levels will bounce back, and that is actually an unfortunate truth. I mean, I've been wondering as well if this short-term impact, lower pollution levels, and especially for communication surrounding it, it will convince more people of the impact they can have by switching to, well, as our theme today, electromobility. In the EU in the first quarter, as reported that electrically chargeable vehicles, their registrations doubled, and hybrids increased, if I remember correctly, up by about 45%. So, we've already seen, and bear in mind, of course, the market overall in the first quarter was down 55. So growth of any magnitude is phenomenal, let alone, as I say, a doubling of electrically chargeable vehicles and 45% increase in standard hybrids.
So as far as those higher numbers for electric vehicles goes, which manufacturers do we think have actually seen the best outcome from that? Which of them have benefited the best?
There's obviously mixed elements to this. It's not purely related to electromobility, but I've discussed this before. But the key standout player globally appears to be Toyota, certainly based on the latest financial and global sales stroke deliveries figures that we've seen. So essentially, Toyota in the first quarter, their revenues were up about 9.2%. Now that's Q4 of their financial year, Q4 2020, but that is a significantly better performance than other OEMs, most of which have seen their revenues not surprisingly slump in the first quarter. The second point is, of course, that Toyota, it has a very, very strong electrified lineup. I mean, we only have to turn on the TV to see Toyota adverts and extolling the virtues of their range of 9 self-charging hybrids. I mean, going forward, a lot hangs in the balance, but of course it does fundamentally all depend on two issues. One, what the investment will look like in terms of developing the charging infrastructure for electric vehicles. But before that, even just any stimulus packages that come from national governments or the EU, just to get the markets going and stimulate that recovery in the short term.
Yeah, because we've seen some major developments for the EU in terms of a coronavirus recovery plan. Tom, I know you've been looking into that. Could you tell us a bit more about the package?
Yeah, absolutely, Phil. Well, the European Commission has revealed a €750 billion recovery plan to help pull the EU economies out of coronavirus nosedives, effectively. So the package has actually been dubbed Next Generation EU, which will make up to €500 billion in grants and €250 billion in loans. And speaking at a press conference, the Executive Vice President of the European Commission, Frans Timmermans, said that the package must do no harm to climate ambitions. So they're really laying the ground here for this being a green recovery, not just a recovery, not just a return to normal, but a green recovery. So the new investment looks to support key technologies for a clean transition, which will include renewable energy, clean hydrogen, batteries, carbon capture systems, sustainable infrastructure. Timmermans also outlined the ability for funds to support the financing of 1 million electric vehicle charge points, clean fleet renewals and sustainable transport infrastructure.
So how have these plans been received?
Well, the package did receive applause for drawing attention to the need for a recovery and for it to be green, but it also did attract some criticism. You had Eric Mark Huitema, the Director General of the European Automobile Manufacturers Association. He said it was disappointing that the proposed recovery package was quite brief and a bit vague on the instruments and financial means for the recovery of the automotive industry. He said the sector is now basically waiting for clarity on how the announced green measures like fleet renewal schemes and deployment of alternative fuel infrastructure will be implemented in practice.
So in terms of electromobility, where would these best be directed?
Well, I spoke with Julia Politkovskaya, the Director of Clean Vehicles and E-Mobility at Transport Environments. She highlighted the importance of not simply using the funds to restore the industry to its pre-COVID-19 state. She said we should use the money to save the industry and to transform it at the same time, so it will be a dual purpose, if you like. Now, when it comes to allocating funds, she did identify charging infrastructure as quite a key area for investment because it effectively presents the opportunity to create jobs quite quickly as a stimulus point for funds across Europe, local bodies, businesses and citizens. So it's not just at the EU level, of course. You're having governments across Europe also allocating funds, also setting out investment plans to make sure that green infrastructure and electromobility charging sees the resources it needs to operate effectively. Now, Transport Environment calculated that 1.3 million charge points will be needed across the EU by 2025 and nearly 3 million in 2030. This will require an investment of 1.8 billion euros by 2025, or 3% of the EU's annual investment in road transport infrastructure. Now, the group also calculated that in Europe, carmakers invested a record of 60 billion euros in the production of EVs and batteries last year. That's 19 times more than 2018. That's a huge amount. Politkovskaya actually considers this pace investment to be the litmus test for success. If electromobility is capable of harnessing this momentum, it will bring, of course, with it a new ecosystem comprised of an electrified European supply chain, localised battery production and charging infrastructure. So it's not just one element. We need to make sure that there's a real rounded green recovery that involves electromobility.
They probably have to tread carefully because you're running the risk of leaving non-EV buyers behind. If you incentivize electric vehicles, which tend to be more expensive, and you're not incentivizing the traditional petrol diesel cars that are more affordable to many, there are risks associated with that. And as I alluded to earlier, that those buyers instead will either hold on to their vehicle or effect to buying a new used car.
Phil, what do manufacturers need to do in order to ensure a quick turnaround for their vehicle manufacturing?
Well, like you alluded to, manufacturers really need to invest in electromobility, and they are at the moment. There's always more they can do. We've seen quite a lot of European manufacturers now launching new models, launching them out to the market, which is giving them an idea of demand, which is giving them an idea of how they can scale up their manufacturing processes, and also where the supply chain might be weaker and areas that they need to shore up in that respect as well. Now, first of all, manufacturers need to convert plants to be able to build electric vehicles. That is a massive undertaking because the production lines are very different. The different parts, components, procedures when building an electric vehicle, I said that they're different to petrol and diesel. Alongside this, a lot of manufacturers currently rely on battery shipments from Asia. Now, this has its own problem in itself because obviously lithium-ion batteries cannot be flown on a plane, they have to be shipped, so there's quite a long lead time between ordering and receiving them at a factory. And of course, whenever you lengthen the supply chain, and in this respect, going across continent, it opens up the possibility of weak links or disruptions, which can then have a severe knock-on effect on production of other vehicles. car makers really need to start establishing a supply chain in Europe so that they can ensure they have got access to the components they need when they need them, as soon as they need them. And that will also help them to ramp up their electric vehicle production at the same time as consumer demand starts to increase.
So how are they going about this?
Well, what we're finding now is that, like I said, car makers need to invest, and they are investing. There's options to either invest in their own facilities in Europe or, and which is increasing the case, find a partner which they can work with to build a battery facility in Europe, in which case, again, shortens the supply chain and gives them more control over what they're bringing in and when they're bringing it in. For example, we've got Volkswagen, who have invested 900 million euros in Northvolt. They now own 20% of the company, which has started to build a battery facility, or gigafactory as they're currently known, in Sweden. We're seeing an increased effort to ensure that the supply chain is tightened, and also to make Europe a centre of excellence, if you like, for battery manufacturing.
Well, we obviously know a lot about how manufacturers are planning to produce new batteries and how they're forming partnerships to do so. But what about when a battery reaches the end of its life? What happens to it then?
A battery, a lithium-ion battery, as we all know, has a shelf life. There's figures being bandied around about, batteries being able to last around about 100,000 kilometres, for example, before realistically they become unuseful. But what we're now seeing is solutions, which is a really positive aspect. We've got BMW, who have built a battery farm, if you like, at their Leipzig plant. At the moment, this is holding 500 BMW i3 batteries, but this can be expanded to 700. And what this does is stores energy from the company's wind turbines at the site and releases it when there's a lack of energy coming from these, therefore reducing the need for the plant to draw from the grid. Again, in making the business more sustainable, but also levelling out and making sure that the plant doesn't take too much from the energy grid, which BMW also point out is a benefit for these surrounding areas.
And actually, that brings us quite neatly to the end of our discussion today. As ever, it's been really interesting, so thanks to you both.
No, thank you, Tom. Thank you, Phil.
And please don't forget to subscribe to this channel on YouTube to get all the latest updates and episodes. You can also sign up to the Daily Brief email at autovistagroup.com/sign up to stay up to date with the latest automotive news. You can follow us on Twitter at autovista_group and connect with us on LinkedIn. Thanks very much for watching. We'll catch you next time.